Since the first industrial revolution, greenhouse gas emissions have greatly impacted the global climate, and moreover, have contributed to the melting or warming of the ice caps in both poles. The first half of the 21st century featured an unprecedented and unexpected rapid melting of the ice caps in the Arctic and a differential increase in temperature of the Antarctic landmass, which leads us to today. Our sea levels have risen by over 5 meters, the ice caps of the North Pole have completely melted, and the overall size of Antarctica has decreased by 10 to 15%. We asked individuals to share how the melting of the ice caps has impacted them. These are their stories.
All of the ice in the Arctic has melted as a result of global warming. The worldwide increase in temperatures resulted in the melting of all this ice in a number of ways. Global warming resulted in warmer surface temperatures, warmer jet streams, warmer ocean currents, and more acidic oceans. When we began tracking the continuous loss of ice in 1979, we noticed the temperatures in the Arctic had been increasing 2 times more than the rest of the Earth. Because of this, glaciers were melting at their surface, creating standing water on top of the glaciers. This standing water collected microbes and pollutants, resulting in the blackening of surface ice. This blackening made the ice absorb 90% more energy from the sun's light than usual, giving rise to more melting and more warming. Additionally, warmer temperatures caused frozen ground to thaw, releasing copious amounts of trapped carbon dioxide and methane. The warmer jet streams created increased pressure above the Arctic. This increased pressure broke the typical cycle of polar winds, forcing these polar winds away from the Arctic and holding warmer air above the ice. This allowed the ice to melt for increasing and longer periods of time of the year. The warmer ocean currents created a two-front battle for the ice as well. Currents used to flow underneath Arctic glaciers from the equator, and these currents had increasingly been able to melt the ice from the bottom of the glaciers, drastically reducing ice's thickness, making it less able to maintain its cool temperature. Finally, increasingly acidic seawater raised the melting temperature of the ice. Because of this, seawater needed to be increasingly colder to form ice, and the water is only increasing in temperature. All of these man-made problems contributed to a dangerous positive feedback loop. These forces and the momentum they created accelerated the melting of ice upwards of 13% per decade, a rate faster than any of our climate models had predicted. As a result, we were unable to stop the melting. It was too late. After seeing all the awful implications of an ice-free Arctic, I wish we scientists would have acted more proactively in motivating the government and people to stop the ice from disappearing.
Behind me are a few of the only Arctic polar bears left in the world, and when we come to think of their habitat, the melting polar ice caps, they're one of the first species that comes to mind. Polar bears like these relied on their rapidly diminishing environment to hunt, fish, travel, and reproduce, but with so few left, most have been moved out of their natural habitat. The melting ice caps have also become exponentially more dangerous due to the increasing distances between ice platforms and more hazardous swimming conditions. Polar bears aren't the only target of the melting ice caps though, but the food they eat are also in danger. The rest of the marine food chain depend on the ice for their habitat as well as their food, and as it slowly melts, species are diminishing in numbers as well. The Arctic seal population has also declined, and being that seal pups are one of the leading sources of food for polar bears, the average polar bear weight is hitting critical lows. Additionally, Arctic vegetation is declining in abundance and size, and over time has begun to adapt to its increasingly more dangerous environment. We haven't done enough in the past to help the species of the Arctic, but we can still help to save those that are left.
I lost everything. They told us this would happen, but no one listened. It was a little worrisome that the sea levels rose a little over 20 feet in a few decades, but no one really took it seriously. They continued to warn us. It started with warmer summers, then warmer years. It took only a few degrees, about 7 degrees on average, so nothing was done. But once we started catching less fish, people started to get worried. The commercial and sport fishermen were starting to have troubles catching much of anything. People lost jobs, businesses went under, and then the fish left completely. Then the storms hit, one after another, until there were 2 record-breaking hurricanes within 3 years of each other. The first one hit in the summer of 2042, and did some real damage to my property. It took off part of my roof, tore off my chimney, and knocked down a few trees around my house. Just after final repairs were made, the second one hit in 2044. The hurricane took everything from me. Not only did it completely destroy my home, which had been in my family for decades, forcing me to never return after I evacuated, but it destroyed almost the entire little coastal community where I grew up. My friends' homes, my work, my church, all destroyed within the blink of an eye. I even lost a good friend of mine. All I know now is that we should have listened.
Right now, I live in Lawrence, Kansas. When everybody first became worried about global warming, I never saw it as a problem because I was so far removed from the issue. How can sea levels hurt such a landlocked state such as Kansas? As the temperature increased, the farming season got a few days longer each year, and I began to think global warming wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. Little did I know the impacts that the melting would have on me. Eventually, the price of fruit grew exponentially. We could only afford to eat meat every other day and had to forget about fruit almost completely. Then came the population boom. As Florida and California began to sink, hordes of displaced Americans began traveling to Kansas for protection. The woods behind our house were completely knocked down, and there's nonstop construction to build homes for these people. Our schools are overcrowded, and our teachers and city officials are overworked. We cannot sustain enough food for all the people when we cannot export food from the coast. My family wants to move, but we have nowhere else to go. Nowhere is safe. I wish I had paid more attention to the signs earlier. I would have reduced my electricity use and advocated for others to do the same. And I feel terrible for the future generation that has to deal with the mess that we have made.
The global economic impact of the melting ice caps was no surprise to those in the field of economics. Economists began predicting the economic effects of sea level rise before 2010, but it was years before people began to listen to their predictions. And by that time, the effects were already underway. Coastal property values began to crash before sea levels rose even a few feet. Once mortgage bankers and some of the general public began to realize it was too late to stop the sea level rise. Home sellers quickly began to outnumber buyers, insurance rates skyrocketed, and banks refused to write mortgages for doomed properties. Soon after, the coastal property bubble completely crashed, leading to the largest economic recession throughout many countries. However, unlike previous property bubble crashes, this one has yet to recover, and likely never will. As the sea level continues to rise, property values continue to decline. It's an endless cycle that can no longer be prevented since action wasn't taken earlier to prevent the ice melt.
In the future, it may be too late, but there's still time to act today. Reduce, reuse, and recycle paper, cardboard, and plastic products. Choose to walk, bike, or carpool instead of putting more cars on the road. Opt for locally grown foods that don't use up tons of fuel to get to your kitchen table. Save electricity and control water use in turning off lights and unused electronics, and also turning off the water when not using it. Most importantly, inform yourself and others, because there is no Planet B.